I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. You guys may have wondered somewhere over the past 750 some odd reviews that Tom and I have done here, what is the first album that we ever truly listened to? The first one that we owned, that we treasured, that we had to listen to time and time again, memorize every guitar riff, every vocal melody, every lyric. We had to know everything. For me, we'll get to that, but for Tom, we're going to do Tom's first album today. Tom, what is this album?
No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom,
Woo,
1995.
No doubt.
So, growing up, I grew up in a very musical family, and I was the youngest of four, getting some personal stuff out of the way.
It was like The Sound of Music, just in Iowa.
yeah, basically. We had the staircase, we all lined up, and so, But being a younger kid, it's not like you have a job, you can go out and buy music. When Tragic Kingdom came out, I was 6 years old, so it's like, I didn't freaking have a job. What is this?
It's child labor laws. Otherwise, you probably would have.
Exactly, yeah. So I really relied on my older brothers to get me into the music I listened to a lot of stuff on the radio, and I really grew up on that 90s alternative rock genre. And No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom, first CD I ever owned. I didn't buy it myself, got it as a gift, but my brother John and I kind of shared a music collection growing up. We listened to a lot of cassettes and stuff too, and whatever my other brothers or my parents had around. But this was the first one that was like mine, and I listened the crap out of this album, and I just ended up loving it from that. And it's one of those albums that it's fun to revisit, but I've always kind of wondered, is this album really good, or do I just like it because of that nostalgia? And that's why I love revisiting albums and
with our reviewer hats.
With our reviewer hats,
the Sherlock Holmes hat,
thinking of it more analytically.
Yes.
And while that's not to say it's not like I haven't listened to this album in years. I still listen to it, every now and then, and I always enjoy it when I put it on. It's always been on my favorites list for albums, but it's cool to listen to it with our reviewing hats on, as you said. So just to kind of get into the style of it a bit and what I really like about it. First off, I want to point out that this is the prime example of how you can love an album and not necessarily love a band. Because I have listened to just about everything else that No Doubt has put out, and I haven't really enjoyed it all that much. But I love Tragic Kingdom.
Nothing's on the same level as Tragic Kingdom.
It's true. This is just their gem. And so if you ask me, Tom, are you a No Doubt fan? I'd probably say, not really, but I love Tragic Kingdom. And that's just my go-to response. I'd be curious to see if any of you guys have artists and albums out there that you have experienced that with, because this is one I've always come back to, but I've never cared to really dive deep into the rest of their stuff.
Beatles.
Oh, yeah, right. They only had one good album.
Only
right?
one.
Yeah, just one. But
it was Help.
Help? That's your pick?
No.
I mean, it's a good album.
It's just the first one that came to my mind.
Okay, fair enough.
So what about the style of this album? They're really mixing a ton of different genres here.
They really are, because you could call it ska just from the standpoint of the fact that it's kind of pop rock with some horns. Some
reggae beats in there.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that calling it ska necessarily is a little bit off, because at least when I think of ska, I associate it with more punk-fueled rhythms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a little bit more edge.
You definitely get that, a little bit of that punk edge from time to time, but it's not what the music is based on. The songwriting is not, it's founded on rock principles.
It really is.
Whereas, Real Big Fish, that's ska.
Yeah. Or like Streetlight Manifesto, stuff like that. Yeah, like that's what I consider ska. This is a little too close to pop, it's a little too close to rock, and to be perfectly honest, I think it plays around in too many genres to be labeled as one thing.
For sure.
There's definitely some funk on here, so there's just some straight up pop. I like that The Climb, the longest track on the album, also I gotta say perfectly placed right in the middle of the album, kind of splitting things up. That one's got more of a bluesy vibe.
Sure.
But the songwriting side, also just the instrumentation is top-notch on this album. The guitar playing, the drumming, even Gwen Stefani's vocals, but the bass playing. Oh my God, and as a bass player, growing up playing the bass, this is an album I always came back to.
Inspirational.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the bass player does not settle for just the typical kind of quarter notes following the root chords, everything like that. The bass jumps around, it pops out of the mix, and totally grabs me in.
Now, you've forced me to listen to Tragic Kingdom. We've played many a cribbage game listening to Tragic Kingdom.
That's true.
And it's an album that I always appreciated when it was on. With the reviewing hat on, though, it really really opened my eyes to what No Doubt is doing on Tragic Kingdom that makes this such a good listen. And you know, I wouldn't use accessible as a word to describe this. There's certainly tracks here that are more accessible than others, but what really like lit me up was how dense the songwriting is. Every single track is just packed with instrumentation, and it's dense is the way to put it. I mean, there's just so many complicated rhythms going on at once that it takes many listens to actually discern the difference between what's going on and all the different melodies that you're hearing at once. Not to mention, Gwen Stefani is going all over the place with her vocals. She has a damn near operatic voice. The way she can just go from like a lower octave to a higher octave and really pack a ton of intensity is quite impressive. And throughout this album, I was kind of just knocked off my feet by her vocal presence. And I always I have a tendency to favor, you know, female vocalists in a rock setting where they can really project, add a lot of intensity, because so much so in rock music you have, you know, the drums are controlling dynamics and intensity. When you have a vocalist who can do that, I mean, it takes a powerful voice, and Gwen Stefani I thought stepped up to the plate on this album and completely knocked it out of the park. Overall, like the songwriting package I mean, on especially like the first like 6 tracks are just I mean, I couldn't stop listening to it.
And I definitely do favor the front half a little bit.
Yeah, I do too.
Not that the back half is bad, but here's the thing, guys. This is a 14-track album.
It's an hour long.
And it's they're not particularly short songs.
No.
Now, and you compare this to like we recently reviewed Doolittle by Pixies, and that is a fairly short album, but it's got 15 tracks. But all of them are just solid. I think that here there isn't a bad track. There's no stinker, but there are clear highlights that you're going to grab.
And those are just on the front. I mean, Excuse Me, Mr. Track 2 is, I mean, it has to be one of just the best rock songs I've heard. It's fantastic and really sets the tone for the rest of the album. It serves as a good thesis statement for just the style, what you're going to hear on Tragic Kingdom, you know, coming second after Spiderwebs, which is a pretty solid opener.
Yeah.
You know, a couple other tracks, Just a Girl, big single. I mean, it's what you heard for years to come throughout the rest of the 90s. Don't Speak, a couple years later after this album came out, that song got really big, which I still think is a fantastic track. I mean, it's easily my second favorite track on the album, and, you know, has kind of that Aerosmith sort of Dream On guitar, and, you know, I love that song, so naturally I love this song, and you know, they're similar, but it's so different in the way that it, you know, just projects a certain emotion.
It's interesting too, you know, we also, I want to jump back to another review we did recently, and that's Holes Lived Through This. This just came out a year after. And it's interesting when you think about, you know, rock bands being fronted by female vocalists. Obviously Gwen Stefani and Courtney Love are going for very different things. But it's interesting how they both still succeed in their own right. I think that Gwen Stefani develops a very interesting persona on this album with the lyrics that she's addressing. You get a lot of positivity out of her in a lot of the songs, but then also you get these kind of subtle critiques of just you know, society in general, her role in life, you know, what she wants to do, particularly on Just a Girl, definitely a social statement. But then I find that there is just a lot of positivity on this album. Obviously, like I said, whole, very different approach, but I think that both vocalists do a good job of making their vocal performance match the message that they're trying to go for.
Very true.
And you're absolutely right when you said Gwen Stefani runs the full gamut. She can get kind of low and get in those lower registers, and she can shriek. And she's got that vibrato that sounds like a goat. It's just like all over the place. You know. But it pulls it off. She pulls it off. It works with the music.
Stevie Nicks goatness.
There you go. Her and Stevie Nicks. Imagine that duet.
Oh God. Just a field of goats. Tom, what are you giving this?
I'm giving it a 96.
I'm going to go 94. That puts this as a 95. It's a must-listen album. If you haven't heard Tragic Kingdom, you know, it might be a little bit off the beaten path for most, you know, music enthusiasts out there. This is definitely, if you're going to pick one album out of No Doubt's catalog, this is the one you want to pick up and really tear apart, because a lot of good stuff here. What did you guys think of Tragic Kingdom? What's your favorite No Doubt release, or mid-90s kind of this whole genre amalgamation that's going on? I mean, it was a big thing in the 90s. What's your favorite album from that era? Let us know. www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Let us know what albums you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
This world is forcing